here. I'm just going to try and see if I can share my screen. I was a bit disappointed, Chris, that you said he's been really good this year. I was thinking, what did I do wrong last year? Thanks, Chris, and Happy New Year to everybody. As Chris said, many of you will know me because I've been doing this a little while now. But for those of you who don't, my name's Sam Norris. I am the co-director of Grand Union Finance, and we really specialise in finance for property investors and developers. So yes, we do residential mortgages, but we will focus more of our attention on the sort of investor side. So buy-to-let mortgages, HMOs, serviced accommodation, social housing, commercial mortgages, bridging and development finance, that sort of thing. You can contact me using any of the details that are on screen, number, WhatsApp. I'm happy to respond to text messages, email, and then I'm all across social media, including Clubhouse for any of you that are using that new social media platform. Again, the same as most of my social media platforms, it's just at the Sam Norris, because I wanted to make sure everyone knew that I was the one and only, of course. So today, what I've noticed is that we tend to run out of time for questions. So what I tried to do was maybe allow a little bit more time for that, especially as we're going into a bit of a tricky time. So I've only sort of got 2 sections to run through before, usually I go through 3 before going into a bit of a Q&A. So first and foremost, we'll talk about lockdown 3, or the trilogy as I'm calling it, and what changes that's brought to the property market as a whole, obviously focusing a little bit on mortgages and that sort of thing. Before going on to something that we've done quite a lot in the last couple of months, which is looking at ways of financing deals where you're not necessarily basing the finance on the purchase price, which is quite interesting, before moving on to the normal Q&A. So I'm just going to move, everyone's filling up my screen, so I'm going to move your lovely faces over to the side so I can only see Chris in the corner, and then we'll get moving on. So lockdown 3, what's going on with lockdown 3? I'm really hoping there isn't a lockdown 4, because I might just start repeating myself. But what was really, really good was after lockdown was announced, I think it was Monday, wasn't it? The government were quick to specify that the property market was remaining open. And so what I decided to do was I made a point this week of trying to speak to as many different contacts that I've got that will touch upon a certain aspect of the mortgage or bridging or development finance application process, to see what they can see as implications for this third lockdown. So kicking it off with solicitors, I'm very, very fortunate to know a lot of really good solicitors. So first things first, got in touch with a few of those, many of which are working on cases that we're working on. Pretty much every single one that I spoke to said that the entire team or the entire firms were still all working remotely. And every single one of them said that this was certainly having a negative effect on some of them used the word work ethic. I think there's probably the wrong terminology, but certainly they're just not simply able to get as much work done in a day as they would normally do. There's distractions at home, we're all aware of that sort of thing. And certainly they had just seen that their whole process had slowed. One thing that was quite interesting was they was just still a lot of the support staff for a lot of these firms are still being furloughed. So a lot of the fee earners, which is the technical term for the solicitors, are still working, because obviously their income is very much dependent on the work that they do. They can't just be furloughed. So they're all still working, but they're having to take on added responsibilities because their support staff are being furloughed. So that was quite an interesting point that I hadn't really thought of before. So if you're struggling to get in touch with your solicitor over the next couple of weeks, that might be the reason why. One of them actually said to me that he had certain points during the day where he was turning his phone off completely, which contributes to about 3 hours throughout the working day. And he had told his clients that he was having to do that because that was his time where he was doing the support staff work, if you like. So certainly on the legals, expect to see a few sort of delays, shall we say. So moving on to the next S, which is surveyors. Again, over the years, very lucky to have some good contacts when it comes to surveyors. Again, they're discussing the fact that there's going to be delays, but there's some decent reasons for those. In fact, pretty much every single one of them was suggesting that the turnaround time was effectively going to be doubled. So we're talking about the time it takes to actually get something booked in, the time it takes for them to actually then go and conduct the survey, and then obviously the time it takes for them to put together that report. And it's actually because, again, quite a few of them are being furloughed still. So there are fewer surveyors on the ground, which means, and this also was feedback from mortgage lenders actually as well, they're thinking that probably about a quarter of the normal surveyor workforce isn't available for one reason or another at the moment, which obviously is putting a bit of a strain on them. Apart from that, in addition, we are finding that some properties are obviously occupied, either by the vendor or by tenants. And we've got a case at the moment where we're actually doing 3 remortgages for a client. 2 of them has offered and they're close to completion. One of them has stumbled a little bit because the tenants are refusing to allow the surveyor to go into the property, which, let's be honest, is completely understandable. But it is something that has unfortunately led to a massive delay in that particular transaction. Now, the good thing on that is that in terms of the reason that they're raising the funds, the money that they're raising from the 2 properties is actually enough to complete their next purchase, but they do need the money out of that last property to complete the refurb works that they wanted to do. So that is a little bit at risk, but that's what we're seeing. On the flip side as well, there are some surveyors that are still working that as well are refusing to enter properties for certain reasons. They're checking out if people in there are NHS workers or care staff and things like that, so might put themselves at risk. So there's a lot of very, very good reasons why this is all happening. It's not just surveyors, being arses. there are good reasons for why they're doing that, and this is something we've also been reported from mortgage lenders as well. But moving on to mortgage lenders, a real mixed response from lenders. I think a lot of the positives, and I hate to be the sort of the negative person here, I think a lot of the positives comes from some of the people I've been speaking to being a little bit salesy, should we say, and doing the whole, it's business as usual, so keep those cases coming in sort of thing, when the reality probably is that most of them are struggling a little bit. Having said that, I know this was perhaps pre-lockdown, but in reality, for most lenders where their workforce is working from home, many of them have started to get used to it. And certainly, when we're picking up the phone and talking to lenders now, where you can hear that the underwriters are at home or the support staff are at home and stuff like that, they're obviously getting used to it. And I think whereas maybe solicitors have struggled a little bit with communication between various people, mortgage lenders seem to be a bit better at it, if I'm honest. So we have seen, we've done 2 applications in the last month that have gone from application to offer within a week. So there are some lenders out there that if you get everything done properly, and I think this makes it even more important to package applications well and make sure that when you are submitting an application, you are sending everything that a lender wants, so it only goes through the underwriting stage once and doesn't go back and forth. When that is happening, lenders are prioritizing those cases because they can see them getting through quicker. So as much as we've been trying to do that for many, many years, I think now more than ever, it's been really important to try and alleviate the strain on the underwriters by just letting them see a case once, maybe twice if they've got to sign off the valuation report as well. But in terms of some lenders doing things quickly, others are struggling, and we've had a few, that have told us that because of all the additional strain, and obviously we're talking about surveyors being taking a bit more time as well. It is taking a lot longer. In fact, a couple of them have said that it's taken up to 4 weeks once an application has been submitted for it to even reach an underwriter, which, I've been doing this year will be my 14th year in the industry, and I don't think I've ever seen a lender have to take 4 weeks just to get to initial underwriting. That's pretty unprecedented. So just shows what we're up against here. So effectively, I think the message is clear: expect delays. Now, obviously, and we're going to be talking about stamp duty a little bit later on. We've got a stamp duty holiday coming to an end at the end of this quarter. I think now more than ever, it's important to, when you're picking a lender, you need to look at what their service levels are as well as what they're charging you. Interest rate and fees are one thing, but it doesn't matter how much they're charging you in terms of interest rates. If it doesn't get done in time and you end up having to pay thousands more in stamp duty charges, maybe that's not going to end up being the most important thing. So certainly, either speak to your lenders in advance and find out what their service levels are, not just their standard service levels. Go through the process with them bit by bit. Ask them, how long is it taking to get to underwriting? How long a survey is taking? What's your turnaround time to review documents? All these little intricacies. Even ask them how long it will take to get from a case being signed off to the case actually having an offer issued, because some lenders are taking 2 weeks just to do that, which is incredible. So really break it down, and of course, or ask your broker to take this into account. If you do have a deadline, if you need to complete before that stamp duty deadline, if you haven't got applications in now, you already run the risk of missing that deadline, even though it's so far away, because of all of the different aspects that we're looking at here. So not wanting to start off on a negative note, I think it's more a case of me being realistic with you and telling you what the market is looking like at the moment. Be organised, get in there early, and expect delays, basically. But something interesting that we've worked on 2 cases recently where the finance that we've organised has not been based on the purchase price. And I get this asked quite a lot, which is, if I'm buying a property below market value, why can't the lender base their loan on the open market value? And the answer to that is, well, they can. And not as many people realise this as maybe they should, because obviously, look, when you're looking at a deal and you're looking at how much you're wanting to borrow, you have to make sure that if you're following, a particular strategy, whether you're buying a distressed property to renovate and then sell it, or whether you're buying a distressed property to renovate it and then keep it and refinancing it to pay off any bridging or development finance, you need to make sure that the deal stacks up. And in reality, the less you borrow, the more likely it is to stack up, the lower your cost of funds. And so, although we're talking here about borrowing a bit more, I would say, make sure that your deal still stacks up when you're borrowing more, because you've got to factor in the additional cost of funds. But there are many reasons why a property might be just being bought below market value. We tend to see it mainly there's some kind of distress with the vendor. They've got another property they want to buy, they're moving home. It might be the fact that it's a property that's been inherited and they need to get rid of it, or they need to pay some tax on it, or whatever it might be. They might be moving overseas, probably not unlikely at the moment, but there's various different reasons for a genuine below market value purchase. And so if that's the case, as I said, the open market value is likely to be higher, and then lenders can actually look at the open market value and base their loan off that. This is not mortgage lending. This is bridging lending we're talking about here. So it does need to form part of a sort of a bigger plan. But what it does mean is, usually with bridging, we're limited to around 75% loan to value maximum, and that's a gross loan, so that will include the interest and the fees usually. So what this allows us to do is to break that barrier. So if you are, we've got plenty of clients that will do multiple projects at the same time. Cash is very, very important. And if you don't have quite enough cash to deploy on a certain project because it's tied up in other deals, this might be something that works. So this is sort of a basic breakdown of an example of one that we're looking at right now. We've got the client is actually buying a property for 380,000. What it is it's a multi-unit block. So what that means is they're buying the freehold of a building, but it's been split into 4 flats. Now, the flats, the planning permission was approved and everything like that, but they never actually split the titles. So what the client is doing is he's going to split the titles to coincide with completion. What that automatically does is creates the true open market value of 660,000 on completion. They are buying it from a distressed seller, and there's a very, very good reason why it's so below the what the market value would be if it wasn't split. It's probably about 100 grand under that. But looking at what then the individual value of those 4 flats are going to be, it's going to come to around 660. Now, what we've managed to get a lender to do is to lend based on the open market value, but they've still limited it to 85% of the purchase price. But what that means is they're able to borrow 323,000 which is 85% of 380 as opposed to 75%. Now, the reason that we have done this is because, exactly as I was just saying, this client has got 6 different projects on the go at the moment, would you believe, in one way, shape or form. One of them he's doing cash, but which is a bit annoying because I'd like to do all of them, but we're doing the rest, so it's okay. And he found this particular opportunity and he called me about, well, he actually called me on New Year's Eve at about 6 o'clock and said, I know it's New Year's Eve, Sam, but I really need to speak to you. I said, okay, fine. You know, I won't go out till later. It's fine. And he told me about this particular deal and we did the sums. I just said, this is a cracking deal. You can't miss out on it. And so straight away, actually sent out some proposals to a few lenders that I know that would do this. And actually, I got a text message on New Year's Day morning from one of them saying, I can't send anything out to you at the moment, Sam, but we will go to 85% on this as the purchase price. So I was able to tell the client pretty much straight away, the first day of the new year, that we were able to get it done. And that, by the way, is on an interest rate of only 0.89%, which isn't actually too bad. Still the standard fee is 2%, but 0.89% effectively on an 85% LTV bridge is pretty good. So if you do think there's going to be a disparity between what you're purchasing it for and what the true open market value is, there might be a way, if you really need to eke a little bit more out. It's not all bridging lenders will do it, but some will. And so it's definitely something worth thinking about. So hopefully that might be a bit of food for thought for you. Until talking about food for thought, it's my turn now. So over to you guys. If you've got any questions, you can put me on the spot and I'll see if I can answer them for you.
Yeah, make them as difficult as possible as well.
Thanks, mate.
I mean, that's. I'll just see if anyone's got any questions for you, Sam.
I think Roger's got his hand up.
Oh, okay.
Physically got his hand up. He's not pressed any buttons or anything. He's physically got his hand up.
I don't know if I can. I might be able to unmute you. No, I can't.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Roger. How are you?
Ah, right. Good. And you?
Yes, fantastic.
Good.
Thank you.
I haven't met Sam Norris before. So it's interesting to know how long he's been in business, how much business he's transacted in the last year, that sort of thing. God,
I probably need my operations manager to tell us how much we've transacted in the last year. It's been a lot. I myself have been a broker. Well, I've been in the industry, should we say, since 2007. Which is when I know I don't look like I'm old enough to have been in the industry that long, but first qualified in 2007 and have pretty much remained in the industry the entire time. I had about 1 year out in that entire time where I wasn't doing what I'm doing, and yeah, I mean we aim at our target at Grand Union Finance is that we transact 20 cases on a monthly basis. Most of the time we hit that. And we've been in business since June last year. Before that, my business partner and I were working for another firm, and between us, we were probably hitting around 35 to 40 a month there as well. So we transact relatively high volumes on an individual basis. He and I are pretty much involved on every case that we work on. So one thing that we certainly we think that we're pretty good at is we know that it's a big problem in our industry. Everyone's had this issue. I can't get in touch with my mortgage broker. And it is actually because the way that the industry is set up, brokers are expected to do quite a lot. And so it isn't always easy to get hold of people. So we've tried to alleviate that issue by having sort of 2 brokers for the price of 1 in both myself and my business partner. And we have our operations manager, Ruby, who's that third port of call as well. So yeah, we're all involved in every case. We have a meeting every single morning where we go through every single client that we're speaking to at the moment, just to make sure that everyone is being kept up to date and stuff like that. So hopefully that's a bit of background on me, but happy to answer any questions you've got, Roger.
That's good. And do you do commercial mortgages as well?
We do.
Commercial lending, right?
Yeah. So although I do a fair amount, my business partner Engin is the sort of the commercial mortgage guru between the two of us. But as I say, we tend to do both, or at most cases together. We'll run everything by each other to make sure that we leave no stone unturned when it comes to thinking outside the box, really.
Lovely, thank you. I've got your telephone number, and Grand Union Finance is presumably somewhere in Hemel.
No,
Union
no, I'm actually looking at the Grand Union Canal out of my window. Well, I would if it was light enough. I'm based up in the West Midlands, but I'm originally from High Barnet, and our office is in central London. So the thing that connects where I am now back to central London is the Grand Union Canal, and that's where we came up with the name.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sam.
Not
I'll
a
try
problem
and be
at
in
all.
contact.
No, I look forward to it.
Thanks, Roger. So Sam also puts his details on our WhatsApp group as well, so they'll be available for you there, and so that's good. Any other questions for Sam before I hit him with my questions?
You've been thinking like for ages for just the most difficult question you can think of.
Well, this isn't a test, Sam. So first, I was impressed that you answered the phone call on New Year's Eve, and more impressed that you got it. Yeah,
I thought it was the pizza delivery guy. That was what it was.
Well, it's a sign of the times, because obviously you wasn't going anywhere, so you may as well do some work. So
amazingly, the person that sorts out our IT, I didn't realise, because we were so busy on New Year's Eve. We were so busy. I didn't see that he'd emailed me saying I need to take the server down at 4 p.m. So suddenly I'm doing some research for a client, and the server goes down, and I'm straight on the phone. What are you doing? And and suddenly I'm getting a call from Mengi, a call from my ops manager. I think all of us finished around 7:30 on New Year's Eve. It was just so much going on at the moment. The market is so busy, but it's great. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, that's good. That is interesting that it is so busy. I mean, going back to your point about the furloughing, I mean, I know from some transactions I'm doing myself at the minute that the conveyancers and the solicitors are taking on work that they wouldn't normally do, and the ones that are working are getting overloaded actually. And Melinda's point, I think, was quite right in terms of you should just be furloughing people that you don't need, not furloughing people that you do need to support the business. I mean, and then there's a consequence of that is obviously in the timescales that you've talked about in terms of transaction times increasing, which isn't good for anybody in actual fact. So I did have a question about so the point you made about the 85% bridging was really interesting, and that did sound like a cracking deal. I must admit, I'm quite jealous. But in terms of valuations, are you seeing valuations holding up, or are they getting knocked, or what's the position there?
Do you know what? It is a bit of a mixed bag, and I know I've spoken about this loads of notes, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the reality is that I think at the moment you have to put that extra effort into almost proving the value. Myself and Ian, funny enough, we were talking about this earlier on today a few times over the years, where we'll have clients come to us, maybe they want to refinance one of their properties in their portfolio, and they're saying it's worth a certain amount because they've done 100 grand's worth of work to it, so they presume that it's definitely gone up by 100 grand. And we were on a conference call a couple of weeks ago, and this client said to us that they put 100 grand on it. And I said, look, just because you spend 100 grand does not make the value go up 100 grand. I said, you could spend 100 grand installing an upside down tap. That's not going to add any value to the property, is it? So, and he understood. But with something like that, we really are pushing back on clients more so than we ever have to say, you think your property's worth X amount, prove it to us. We'll go out and we'll have a look. We'll look at some comparables and things like that. Because the reality of it is, if you can't show that there has been properties in the vicinity that have sold for a certain period of time, if you're trying to, one thing I would suggest at the moment is it's going to be really hard to break the ceiling price of a road at the moment. Surveyors are just not willing to take that risk. But if you are, or if you're trying to hit that sort of ceiling price, you have got to really show that you have done something special to that property. And actually, funny enough, the podcast episode that I released today, which for the first time ever, I actually interviewed one of my own clients, which was fantastic. A guy called Simon Charnock, who I think that the valuation packs that he puts together are the best in the business. And he goes through in a bit of detail in that podcast episode what he does. And you need to show that if you've added value to a property and you're trying to get to a certain value, you've got to show pictures of what the property looked like originally, pictures of what you did, and pictures afterwards, together with, schedule of works, itemized information on everything that you've done to that property, together with those comparables as well. And the reality is, if you can't find, and I always get this wrong, there's 2 sections to the postcode, but it's the first digit of the second. Basically, those first 3 or 4 digits of the postcode, if you can't find another similar property, or at least 2 or 3 other similar properties, probably in the last 3 to 6 months, that have sold in that area for the amount you're trying to go for, it's going to be very, very difficult to hit that figure, because a surveyor, their PI cover doesn't cover them. They're putting their head on the chopping block. They don't need to. Surveyors, remember, and I say this all the time, as much as I've got some great friends that are surveyors are the only people, to my knowledge, in the process, when you take in agents, brokers, solicitors, lenders, they're the only people that get paid regardless of how good a job they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good point. So are you seeing, the packs that you spoke about, are you seeing a material difference between people who submit the packs as opposed to those who don't?
I would say yes, to an extent, because I always say, look, you've put the work into finding the property, you've put the work into renovating the property. Why not put some money in, some time into making sure that you put these together at the end? What I would say is, in the last probably 3 or 4 months, the clients that we've seen put the packs together, I don't think from memory that we've had a down valuation on any of those. We've had, and actually, to be quite honest with you, considering the number of transactions we're involved in, I would say in the last 3 months, we've only really seen 2 valuations. I'm not going to say down valuations below what we applied for. Luckily, one of them, it didn't matter because it was such a low loan to value anyway. But the other one fell out of bed as a result. But we did. We warned that client beforehand that we thought that they were being a bit overzealous. That was a purchase, and they went back to try and negotiate, and the vendor said no, even though he sent in the survey report saying your property is not worth what I'm paying for it, and he wouldn't budge. So yeah, on the whole, I actually think they're standing up pretty well. But as I said, maybe I'm not the best person to ask, because we push on these valuation packs so heavily.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know you've spoken about that a few times, and I know people have had varying levels of success with them. But that's very interesting, Sam. As always, star man. You're like a fixture on the call. So really appreciate all your time and all your expertise and coming along and sharing the update with us. So thank you.
Not a problem at all. Thanks for having me.